So my desk was right next to his. The CEO of the entire company was sitting right next to us. And he had these great office hours where if you got on his calendar, you could show him a business plan of a business that you wanted to start, and he would critique it for you and tell you what he thought about it, and sometimes he would invest. It was kind of like a Shark Tank, but like personalized. And I brought him the idea for the kids' event planning business. And I remember sitting there and just him going through it, and I'm just sweating. I was like, I just gave my boss like my exit strategy. Like, this is the dumbest thing I've ever done. And he just closes it up and he was like, it's great. What's the problem? And I was like, well, I'm safe here. I work for you. I'm safe, and he's like, you're never safe. I'm laying off half the company tomorrow. You'll never be safe if you work for someone else.
And welcome back to the Badass Women in Business podcast, where we have the privilege of welcoming Lisa Troyano-Ascolese. Lisa, welcome to the show. And the same question, or actually request, that we have of all of our guests is to share their story. So tell us who you are, where you're from, and all the interesting tidbits that our listeners would love to know about you.
Thank you. My name is Lisa Troyano-Ascolese. I am from Hoboken, New Jersey, which is a 60,000 person, 1 square mile city directly outside of Manhattan. So we basically have the beautiful view of the Manhattan skyline. You can get in and out of Manhattan from our territory or our area via boat, train, automobile, you name it. And so we are kind of a feeder market to the Manhattan craziness. We like to say we are the city that actually goes to sleep. So things actually close here around 2, 3 a.m. instead of stay up all night. So this has been home for me this is my 18th year here. Before that, I grew up in Bergen County, New Jersey, which is like also right across the river from New York, but about 40 minutes away. And moved down here and just fell in love with kind of the area and the diversity and the proximity to New York. And I came here originally because I was working in Manhattan in online advertising sales, and then my journey took me here, and I ended up becoming an entrepreneur. And that's what I do now. I own 2 real estate brokerages. I have launched a mobile app. Yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm a real estate agent. That's the whole shebang.
I'm sure there's a lot more to that.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit more what attracted you to real estate, because real estate can be a really hard. Well, let me just say this. I live in a small resort town as well, and I feel like everybody is a realtor. And I can guarantee that there's only a small percentage that are actually successful in it. So tell me a little bit more about your desire to be in real estate and how you set yourself apart to be one of the industry leaders.
Yeah. So I was working in a corporate job that was, I liked it at first. It was right out of grad school. I was really enjoying the craziness of New York and had a nice expense account, and life was good. And then my company was being bought and sold a couple times, and I was going through layoffs, but I kept making it through. And I kind of saw the writing on the wall, and I started at the time a kids event planning business. So it was like kids' birthday parties. I started noticing a need for it in the city. There was no real thing back then. I mean, this was like 18 years ago. There was no real, we had as kids, I think Chuck E. Cheese. There was nothing like that in Hoboken. And so I started like a little kids event planning company that would like go to people's backyards, or, you could bring us to a pizza parlor, and that was going to be my launch. And then I grew up in a house. My mother was a full-time realtor, and she had a very successful career. And I kind of had it in my blood. It was always, when we were kids, we were being ushered to open houses and brought to showings and all this stuff. And so I've always loved properties. I've always loved, homes, and we had multiple homes growing up. And it was just one of those things that I think was just in my blood. And so I was like, well, Hoboken, all of my friends are moving to Hoboken, whether they're buying or renting. And so I'll just get my license and pad the bills with doing a couple deals. And it was never supposed to be a full-time thing by any stretch. And then basically what happened was I ended up hating the kids' birthday party thing. I think it's why I waited 10 years to have children. That was just not a fun job at all. Ended up not being fun at all. But the real estate was really taking off, and both were actually doing quite well. So I had to make a decision. Am I going to color with a bunch of toddlers or am I going to sell $1 million homes? And, I closed my company. I didn't even try to sell it, which in hindsight was really stupid. And then I just went full time into real estate, and kind of the rest was history. I took off very quickly. You're right to say, I think in Hoboken, we have 1,011 realtors that identify with Hoboken as their primary market. And there's like 75 of us that do the most work. So it is unfortunately a sink or swim kind of industry. You very easily can sink. But those of us that really make it our craft and are good at what we do and provide ethical representation for our clients, I think, the sky's the limit. And there's certainly people doing way more than I am here. But the majority do less, unfortunately. You're absolutely correct.
You just said something that piqued my interest regarding the hindsight 2020, I should have sold my business. What prevented you from doing that? Is it because you didn't know you could, or because you had a timeline that didn't allow you to?
No, it was more I didn't know I could. Frankly, I didn't know that anyone would buy it. I think that probably was the naivete of it, to be honest. But yeah, looking back on it, and now that I know what I know about growing companies and whatnot, it was certainly something I could have done, because real estate is so cyclical. And at the time when you're first getting started, it's you're not doing a ton. You're just kind of doing as much work as possible to try and generate some income. So at the time, I definitely could have sold it, and I didn't. So that was, we'll say, a mistake, but something I certainly didn't know was possible until now.
Well, now that you've shared the message with all of our listeners, because that's something that Christy and I take to heart, and really appreciate you sharing that. One of the things that we were talking about before I pressed record is the fact that you said that it is your personal mission to show women that entrepreneurship is not only possible, but also a path to happiness. Can you develop a little bit that notion and share with us what drive exists behind that?
What's interesting about my advice to young women now is I always say, go work for someone for a certain amount of time. And you'll hate it. If you're supposed to be an entrepreneur, you'll absolutely hate it. But you'll gain a skill set of what people need from the people that are working for you or that you're working for. So for me, I did 10 years in online ad sales with, some of the people I supported were great. Some of the people I supported were psychotic. And I think both created the salesperson that I am today. And I'm grateful for both of them. I actually shouldn't say just, it was a few years ago, we all met up. And I had one of the men that I supported come to me and apologize and said, I'm really sorry for the way we treated you. It was just a high stakes environment and stress. And I was like, I'm going to stop you. I appreciate everything. Every time you yelled at me, every time because it made me not only realize I'm never working for someone again, but it made me realize that, what is demanding from a person that's higher up. So I kind of took all of it, but I always tell people, try and work for someone else in a field that you like. In this case, it was sales, and you'll learn so much. And that's the first time that I was like, oh, I'm never going to put myself in a position again where someone has the opportunity to talk to me like that, or frankly, that I'm expendable. So the greatest story, and I've said this before on other podcasts, but it was such a pivotal moment in my life. The CEO of the company that I used to work for, it was brilliant, off the charts brilliant, created multiple businesses all over the world. And he had this concept before Google of these, giant loft spaces where everybody is in one room and there's a pool table and all this craziness. And that's the company environment that I worked in. And it was wonderful. So my desk was right next to his. The CEO of the entire company was sitting, he did what he said. He was, sitting right next to us. And he had these great office hours where if you got on his calendar, you could show him a business plan of a business that you wanted to start. And he would critique it for you and tell you what he thought about it. And sometimes he would invest. It was kind of like a Shark Tank, but personalized. And I brought him the idea for the kids' event planning business. And I remember sitting there and just him going through it, and I'm just sweating. I was like, I just gave my boss my exit strategy. This is the dumbest thing I've ever done. And he just closes it up and he was like, it's great. What's the problem? And I was like, well, I'm safe here. I work for you. I'm safe, and he's like, you're never safe. I'm laying off half the company tomorrow. You'll never be safe if you work for someone else. And I was like, huh. And that was I get chills every time I tell the story. It was pivotal. And sure enough, I went through 6 rounds of layoffs because I was, low man on the totem pole. They could afford to keep me. But he was right. I was due a severance package and by the second company that had purchased us. And they said, I'm sorry, we ran out of money. And I was like, I know your parent company, you're not out of money. And they were like, nope, that's it. So in the worst economy ever, after 9 years of loyal work, I just got kicked outside. And so that to me was, okay, you never matter to someone. When you're in these big corporations and you think you're getting your corner desk and your 6-figure salary and all of that, it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, if they need to cut you, they need to cut you. So that was a pivotal moment for me. And not that I would never go back if times got tough and I ever had to. I would always like to think that I would, but I think that's really what spurred my entrepreneurial desire is more like I have to make sure that as a woman in business, you're always your top priority, and you always have to make sure that you're taking care of yourself.
What an interesting story. I love that your boss and the owner had that openness as well. That's a really unique situation to be in. And to get the kind of, you're okay, this is going to work, go for it, is also something that's really, really valuable. I'm curious about going back into your real estate and that you are also a tech developer in essence. Tell us more about what drove you to explore that opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, I love podcasts about entrepreneurship. I love podcasts about I love Shark Tank. I love Dragon's Den. I love those things where people literally out of nowhere have this epiphany and they create these multi-billion-dollar companies. So that to me is so exciting. That's literally at this point probably the only TV I'm watching. So it's one of those things that I think you just have to wait for that moment. And for me, I was dealing with a developer who ended up being a really bad guy, and I'll leave it there. And I just found out too late. So I was too entrenched in kind of his web of lies and deceit. And in the process of calling him out on a very shady thing he was doing, I got fired from a big listing. And the listing, I don't know how much people know about the ins and outs of real estate, but 9 times out of 10, at least at that point, we were paying for the staging. So I was paying $5,000 for all of the staging furniture. And very quickly, I was fired, and I was very happy to be walking away from this person just from a legal perspective. And all of that furniture was just in the house, that's it. So I was calling other realtors, do you need staging furniture? I was putting on Craigslist, which at the time was shady. I was just doing all of this stuff to try and get this furniture out because I had spent so much money. I wanted to at least recoup some costs or have it go to a good home. And I remember sitting it was a brownstone. And I remember sitting in the brownstone on the last remaining couch. And my mover, who still to this day does all of my moves, and I was crying. I was literally like, I can't believe that this is where this deal ended up. And I was nervous because this developer was in I can't believe I didn't see, he was in such bad shape. And the whole thing was just very anxiety ridden. And he just put his arm on me and he's like, it's going to be okay. Everything's going to be okay. This is not the beginning. This is not the end. It's the beginning, or blah, blah, blah. And I was like, I know it's just emotional, blah, blah, blah. He walks out and I had that epiphany moment. I was like, what if I didn't have to get rid of all this furniture and lose all this money? What if I could have rented it and let, 2 of my agents rent the couch, or somebody in a different brokerage rent the dining set? And that's when it hit me. And I immediately stopped crying. And I ran to my husband, who usually, I bring all this craziness to him, and usually he's like, yeah, okay, nice try. And he was like, I think you have something here. And I was like, all right. So we put a huge amount of our money during COVID to developing a mobile app. So I did not, none of the you mentioned I'm a developer. I did not. I paid developers. Know your strengths and know your weaknesses. But we paid a developer to develop it, and it had it's wonderful. It's a first to market concept. It's called REStaged. We are launching 2.0 probably by the end of this year because it's first to market. You go through so many different iterations, and our developers were like, we got to get out there. The best feedback we can get is from the public. And the consistent feedback was the closeout process is just very clunky. So we pulled back, we're redesigning it, and we're hoping to relaunch it at the end of the year. But it's live right now. I mean, you can use it. Just know the closeout process is a little clunky. And we, now we're going on to 3.0 and we're hoping to include some AI components to it. And we're trying to find a developer as a partner. So it's exciting. It's certainly an area I know nothing about. So we're taking it slow, but it's, like I said, it's a huge, huge opportunity. And frankly, in our research, we found that fast furniture, like the IKEAs, and I don't mean to call anybody out, but the furniture that we frankly need to use because it's much cheaper, is a huge strain on our planet. So it's the number one item, I believe, that doesn't break down in a landfill. And so if there's a way to use this furniture over and over again, college dorm rooms, city atmospheres where maybe one apartment you need a certain size table and then 6 months later you don't, that's got a lot of legs, and we're excited. That was a whole component about it that we didn't even think of until we got into building it and the research behind it. I was like, this is really, really a problem that hopefully we help solve. So that's really the app portion of my life.
Love it. From a leadership and mindset perspective, it is super different launching a tech product after having spent so much time in the service industry. Like, what shifted for you in navigating that transition?
Well, it's interesting. I think that actually held me back because, when you're dealing with tech heads and developers, and our developers were in the Middle East, so our meetings were crazy hours. They had to continually say, it's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be perfect. And you have to just launch. You have to just launch. We probably delayed 6 to 8 months because of me, because, the color wasn't right, or this wasn't perfect, or somebody had an issue. Like, it kills me right now that we don't have a pristine closeout process, because in a service industry, everything's perfect. You get in my car as a buyer and that car was freshly cleaned and there is a chilled bottle of water waiting for you, sparkling or still. And I know, where we're going, and if you need a service ramp, or if we're bringing the dogs and the kids, like all of that stuff is something that I pride myself on in a service industry. So it was incredibly difficult in that regard, because that's not how tech is done. You basically launch it, fail, launch again, fail. And that is something I do not handle well at all. So it's been very interesting, to say the least.
What size of team do you run with your real estate brokerage? And how, if I were to ask one of your team members what kind of leader you are, how would they describe you?
I pay her to say that. I run a team. I have 2 brokerages across both locations. We have 30 agents. What kind of leader am I? I'm honest, right? Yeah, I feel like pretty honest. I put them first, which I think is very hard as a leader, because, you're worried about the bottom line and all of that, but I do care what's going on in their lives and what's, I care about the long time of their career. I can't tell you how many times I'm saying to someone, yes, right now, this would be helpful if you sold this property to this person. But if that person buys a lemon in 10 years, are you going to get sued? Are you going to regret that because you can't resell it? Are they going to speak badly about you? So I think they would constantly think that I'm as honest and as ethical as I can be, certainly in a time where our industry is under siege for those exact traits. So I think that's what they would say.
Why 2 brokerages? Like, what was one not enough?
One is plenty. No, it was basically the way our market is. So we run it essentially as one, frankly. So we just have basically 2 locations, but the Jersey City and Hoboken are very different markets, even though they're very similar in the sense that, we're selling condos and homes and lofts and all that stuff. The products are very similar, and we're right next to New York. Hoboken has more of like a quaint, cozy, cutesy kind of feel, whereas Jersey City is more like an extension of Manhattan. So it just made a lot of sense to kind of expand into there during COVID. And so that's why we did it, but we certainly don't need to. And those of you out there, it's fine with one.
So I will reveal myself a little bit, but my guilty pleasure of trash TV involves shows like Selling Sunset, because I love, there's part of me that is absolutely enamored with luxury real estate. And it's just the whole process is so interesting to me. And I know from your submission that you've dealt with some, pretty big players in terms of luxury market and in terms of clients as well. So what's the main difference between what people may see on TV and the reality that you live on a regular basis in the luxury market space?
I think those shows have done a lot to put our industry on the map. I know that they are a huge reason why our industry is under siege right now, because we do get paid very well. It's arguably one of the last industries that can get paychecks like that. But the work that's done on the back end is so much more grittier and intense and nerve-wracking than I think those shows portray, because the majority of us are not dealing in $100 million condos in the penthouse of Manhattan. The majority of us are dealing with, in our market, our average deal size is, $800K. So what is that? I mean, it works out to be like $20,000 or $15,000 as a commission. And in addition to that commission, we have to pay our insurances. We have to pay our staffs. We have to pay our virtual assistants. We have to pay for all the marketing. We have to do the staging. We have to pay for the gas. We have to pay for, it's, when you actually look at what an average realtor makes, it's crazy. The stat for the country is the average realtor makes 23 grand a year. I don't even know where you can live right now for that. So I think what it's done is it's romanticized a portion of our business that, yes, everybody would love to be in, but the crux of our industry is so much more intense than that. And unfortunately, I think those shows are kind of giving us a bad rap. I get the appeal of them. Don't get me wrong. It is nice to see those properties, and they do exist. And I've had the pleasure of working on a couple very high, I think one of the highest priced properties in New Jersey I had the pleasure of representing. But the amount of money that goes into representing something like that is wild. And very few of them actually sell. That's like the fun fact. Very few of them actually sell anywhere near the price they're asking, or it takes 2 years, sometimes 3 years to sell those properties, because you're really dealing with the 2,800 billionaires that exist in the world. So it's one of those things that, like, I think I appreciate them for what they've done to our industry in the sense that they've created rock stars, right? We run around, people ask me questions like you would not believe the questions I get asked. But I think it also did a lot of harm. And now those of us that are really good at our job and we're trying to maintain that level of representation for our clients and the help and the advisory, counsel that we provide, it's very hard because everyone thinks we're just, at the end of the day, we're just ducktailsing into gold coins at night. So it's a little frustrating.
I appreciate your honesty around that and just kind of being real, because like you said, a lot of things get glamorized. I want to dig into what have been the greatest setbacks or challenges that you have had in growing your brokerage as well as your online platform that you can share with our listeners, and how did you overcome them? What were the resources that you used to be able to make it past those, I would call, sticking points?
So when I purchased this particular location. So my story of how I got this brokerage is I had never wanted to own a brokerage. My mentor and arguably best friend was passing away from cystic fibrosis. And he was the owner of this company with a partner. And when he died, the company kind of fell apart. And to no fault of his partners, frankly, we were all very grief stricken. But on his deathbed, he asked me to save it. And that is if anyone's on their deathbed, please don't do that to someone else, because it is very stressful to know that you're the lifeline. And so I took it over, and I glanced over that process of taking it over, which was interesting to say the least. There was a lot of pushback. There was a lot of, that in and of itself could be an entire podcast, but we took it over. We stopped the bleeding in 6 months, and we were profitable in 12. But that whole process of turning this place around was one of the hardest things I've ever done in my career, in addition to one of the most rewarding, because I recognized very quickly that, yes, obviously the company was hemorrhaging money, but it was a heart issue. We were all missing that heart that, he provided. He was the rah-rah. He was everything about the company that was missing. And so to recreate that while still honoring his memory, but frankly, turning it into a completely different company was very challenging. I think that's probably the biggest. And then in there was, our first office flooded out. So I spent, $100,000 putting the whole office together, and the entire thing flooded. So we had to move to a different office. I mean, there's so many little tiny stories of are you sure I should be doing this type moments? But overall, it was the general crux of turning the company around that was probably the hardest and the most rewarding, because now we're a successful company, and it looks very different than what it was, but also there's a lot of similarities, and I'm proud we were able to keep some of those.
In those moments when it was like, is this the right thing? I'm running into so many barriers and challenges. Like, are these signs that I should not keep moving forward? What did you draw on within you or within your community to find the drive to keep moving forward when those roadblocks kept happening?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think because I was doing it for my friend, I think that made things a lot in the hard times. I was like, okay, he did this before all of this, I can do this, I think I really believed in this place and what we stood for. Real estate gets a bad rap. It's a lot of people. There's very little barriers to entry real estate. You don't even need a college degree. And I think there's something beautiful about that, because it allows anybody to, get into a business that doesn't have those barriers to it. But at the same time, we kind of get that reputation that just like anybody could be a realtor. And I think what we were cultivating here was, the brand Engel & Volkers. We're a franchise, so I own their Jersey franchises. And I think the brand Engel & Volkers really stood for this global conglomerate. We were global before it was like sexy to be global. Now everybody's an international real estate company, but we were the only company that started overseas and came here versus everyone starting here and then moving overseas. And I just saw, I was big into travel then, and I just saw how wonderful it was to be able to walk into an Engel & Volkers anywhere around the world and get that same, cup of espresso and that warm hug, and how can we work together? And this is come to my family's house for dinner tonight. And it was just like, that is something that you just don't get at any other real estate company. And I wanted to make sure that survived here, because I was thriving with the brand at that point. And I worked with a mom and pop before, and we became Engel & Volkers under my friend's direction. And the juxtaposition was incredible. I think a lot of it was me embracing it. I was excited to jump into the luxury global sphere. And so right place, right time, I think there was a lot of that. But I basically wanted, on the tough moments, I wanted to make sure my friend's legacy was intact. And I'm that person. Like, it sounds bad. It's not what you're supposed to say on these things, but I don't fail. It kills me to fail. So I kind of just drew on that. I'm not letting this go. I love this company. I'm not working here. And I think it's time in our industry to have someone that everyone can trust. It's very long-winded. Sorry about that.
No, I love what you just shared, especially in regards to like having that bigger purpose leading you into this new adventure, right, that you took. Because I think that so many people start a business because maybe they're good at something, maybe they feel like they have the skills, maybe they are really good technically at doing something and they don't want to do it for the man, but they want to do it for themselves. But I feel that when you have that overarching purpose, when you're doing it for something that is much bigger than just doing it or starting a business for the sake of starting a business, it takes you to whole new heights. So very much appreciate you sharing that piece. Going back to what you said earlier about success, what does that look like to you? How do you define success in your space?
I think very simply, like just freedom. It's freedom to make your own hours. It's freedom to choose who you want to work with. It's freedom to decide what trajectory your life is going to go in. It's freedom to pick your kids up at school. It's freedom to take a day if you want to take a day and not ask 5 people for it. I think it's freedom. That's it. I mean, they've done studies. I think that like after there's a certain amount of money that you make that actually does contribute to happiness. And then anything above that is nothing. It's negligible. It doesn't actually matter. And they said that like there's some, I forget the study that it was, so forgive me, but it was like a huge percentage of billionaires are actually in fact not happy. And I think everyone sees, like, listen, I watched it with my mother's cancer treatments. I watched it with everyone. Like, it is expensive to live in the States. Like, it's just an expensive existence. So you need money, I think, to be happy and have things paid for. But the freedom is something that you can't put a price on.
You're right about it being expensive. I think I saw a study that now says that if you have a child, it costs on average $400,000 to raise that child in the United States, which is insane. So 100%. Has your vision of success evolved over time, like from the time you started, or maybe when you were still working in advertising, to what you just shared right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely in the same vision, in the sense that I always knew, I think more so even then, because I was working for other people, I always wanted freedom. Freedom was the main thing I wanted. They've done studies on the fact that money does buy happiness, but up to a certain point. And then it's something like after you have your basic needs met and maybe a little more, it doesn't actually matter. And I thought that was kind of fascinating. And I think the study, forgive me, I don't know what it was, but I think the study went on to say that the majority of billionaires actually are unhappy at their core. And I think that's really telling. It's like, you don't need all the stuff that I think our country, the world, social media makes you think that you need. For me, having a child spun everything on its head, everything. My husband and I were always working for the next big trip we were going on, or the next investment property we were building and, or buying rather. I think that's changed drastically. I'll always believe in buying more real estate. I get high on my own supply, so to speak. But it's more, now we have a daughter, and I had a bad birth situation with her. So both of us actually almost lost our lives, and we're lucky to be here. And I always say the gift in that was the perspective of, none of this matters. At the end of the day, your health is all that matters, and the people you love are all that matters. And all I care about is making sure she has a spectacular life. My parents worked their butts off to make sure that we were always on a plane and in a different country to learn something different. And we had the best schools, and, maybe at the end of the day, their bank account was at zero, but they were working for us. And I think that's what we're doing for her now. The compass has changed entirely.
I appreciate your transparency in that, because life circumstances definitely change the ideal outcome that we're looking for and what we're prioritizing, for sure. Lisa, for anyone out there that is looking to get into entrepreneurship and be able to have that freedom, what advice would you give them if they are on the fence of like, should I go and jump and do this for myself, or should I not?
Yeah, I mean, so the world's on fire, and I think AI is definitely something you have to take into account now, which is two things that I didn't have to worry about. I think the fundamentals of leaving and starting your own job are simple in that you should have a nest egg. They used to advise you to do 3 to 6 months. I think now you're crazy to leave without having a year, just because the world is kind of on fire. So I would do about a year of full expenses. That means every coffee that's going in your mouth, every trip you want to take, your rent, your Wi-Fi, like anything you can possibly think of, create a big, extensive budget. Like, for example, I even tell people to do, if you're a gift giver, if you love giving gifts, it's going to make you sad to not be able to afford to give those gifts. So like factor that into your budget. And then instead of 6 months, I would do 12 months. And then throw your idea out to other people in the industry. Like, get some sort of apprenticeship type situation where you're either working for free or you're working for 6 months, you're an intern, whatever. Get some sort of insight into that industry. Now, you might be working in it already, and so you don't need to do that step, and that's great. But if you, for some reason, like for example, for the tech thing, I worked with a bunch of people in the media company, and I must have been the most annoying person on the planet that year. I was lunches with everyone. What do I do with this? What do I do with that? Because I still don't know. And then I hired to do the stuff that there was no way I was going to figure out, like coding, for example. So I think surround yourself by the experts in that field. And then for me, honestly, mentorship. So my mentor that passed away was pivotal in my success. I could call him at any time. I could run anything by him. He was 100% dedicated to me. So a lot of our real estate industry, like they have companies that will be like, oh, we have a mentorship program. No, like you need a mentor that actually cares about you, maybe is making money off of you. So like is getting some sort of financial reward in addition to, philanthropic. I think that's really important because I think it's a dying art right now. And I don't know how people do it without that. But the world is changing. I mean, AI is going to be way more disruptive in way more industries than I think people are realizing. Go down that rabbit hole, see if the industry that you're really passionate about could be completely replaced by a robot, because then I think you need to be realistic of whether or not you should do it. But I also think there's always a way, right? Like there's always something you can do. Maybe the robot's going to take your job, but your business is polishing the robot. I don't know, but like some way that you can figure out how to do something, because there's always going to be a job you can do on your own.
Great lesson. And I want to wrap by asking you something that we actually never get asked on our show, is like you're a podcast host yourself. What is the one question you wish people would ask you when you're either a guest or as the host?
Oh my God, I don't know. Would I do it again?
Would you?
Yeah, 100%. Differently.
The same way?
No.
Okay.
I think I shouldn't say that. I think given what I was given, like in the circumstances, yes, I would have done the exact same thing. Had I did this all on my own, I think, and I wanted that kind of solopreneur situation. I think it's way easier if you could find partners or investors. Yes, you have more people to answer to, but when it gets hard, you're not lonely, because the entrepreneurship is a very, very, very lonely business. And I think if you had somebody there that at least is in the trenches with you, it becomes a little bit more enjoyable. So I would say, conversely, the reason I didn't want partners is because I've heard horror stories, but it makes it a lot more enjoyable if you have other people with you. That's the only thing I would change.
100% agree with that. So lastly, if someone is listening to us today and is thinking about taking a big leap into real estate, a new business, or just a scary change, what would you want to tell them?
I think if you do the research and there is a need for it, and you think that you can fill the gaps with what you can't do well with people that can, and you have that buffer, you have to do it. I don't think, unless you're getting into like a medical field or law, I don't know that we're going to have jobs anymore that are kind of just regular jobs. Like, I think you owe it to yourself to try. Certainly if you're young, right? If you're not and you have dependents and all that stuff, there's always a way to do it. There's always a way to figure it out. Like I said, get partners, get people that like can share the burdens, both financial, legal, all of that with you. But you got to do it. Like you got to figure out a way to do it. It's the only way to really build wealth, in my opinion, and be free, which is the whole point of existence.
Well, you're totally speaking our language.
Yes, you should still work here. just in fact, she's like my lifeline. I don't exist without Nicole. So hopefully as she listens to this, she doesn't start her own business and leave me tomorrow.
Well, I think she's heard every word of it, so already. But she can have a recap once we publish. Lisa, this has been incredible. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences, your story, your journey, and your lessons learned. I think it's going to be a lot of value for our listeners to pull from.
Literally, you guys, thank you for doing this, because there needs to be more platforms like this for people to see this as an option. So thank you guys for what you're doing.
Absolutely. And to all of our listeners, everybody, stay badass. Thank you so much for listening. We hope you enjoyed this episode as much as we did recording it. If you like our show, please rate us, drop us a review on your favorite streaming app, and we'll catch you on the next episode. This was the Badass Women in Business podcast by Christy and Aggie.